Hello and welcome to Climbing Daily. Filmmaker Nick Brown has created an hour-long documentary called Statement of Youth, the Birth of British Sport Climbing. It uses archive footage and modern-day interviews to tell the story of how sport climbing started in Britain and the people who pushed the limits of it. We sat down with Nick to find out more about his movie.
Hi, my name's Nick. I'm a filmmaker. I work for UK Climbing, and recently I've been working on a project about 80s sport climbing.
The growth rate in difficulty was, I think, in the 1980s greater than at any other period in climbing.
So I expected myself to go out and do the hardest new route in a new grade because it would like me to do that.
The people, the scene, the sheer amount of new rock and improvements in equipment and training.
So the first time I came up with the concept of the film Statement of Youth was quite a few years ago now. I'd read all sort of Jerry Moffat and Ben Moon's books and thought there's a film there somewhere, but it was a while before I pinned down the concept, and really 2 years ago I started the film in earnest. So I started interviewing people, looking at archive stuff and collating it, and it's only when you start doing that that the film starts narrowing down to what it is now, but it's a long old process, yeah.
There was a small group of people, we were on the dole, we were climbing full time, outside the rest of society, kind of in a way outside part of the climbing world, because we were the people that were doing it full time.
I mean, definitely was a bit of a rebel. Anarcho-punks, anti-Thatcher, and vegetarian.
It's a beautiful old Victorian house. It'd be worth a lot of money now, but it was, it was let to us lot. Everybody in the house was, I think, on the dole.
To say that, it eventually got closed down by the environmental health, tells it all really.
So the film starts in 1983. It starts at Lower Pentruin in Llandudno. And it's kind of where these guys all first met. So Ben Moon and Jerry Moffat and Andy Pollitt, Chris Gall, Martin Atkinson, and they're all sleeping in Paracella's cave. And essentially at that point in climbing, there were no fully bolted sport routes. So there was a bolt every now and then it was a massive run out or a bit of gear. And the story kind of leads you into almost within a decade, climbing is sort of transformed into what it is now. So the film takes you along the steps that, got us there really.
And that was my hardest route in the country at the time when we sold it. It was absolute hell.
One of the first stories I heard about, there's this infamous house in Sheffield where all these guys lived. It's a bit of a squat. It was, horrendous conditions, and I thought, how can these guys live there and still climb that hard? They had no money. They were eating rice for dinner every day. And the first story I heard was they had a room in the house that was boarded up apart from about that much, and they just used the room as a bin. And I thought, that's pretty grotesque, and there's like multiple stories about that. They didn't have a back door and things like that, but the house has started to generate its own stories really, and I found that really interesting. And it's it's a key segment in the film.
There was always like minimum of 15 people in the house. I mean, I think at one point there was maybe 20 people, dossed in there, so there's always tons of people.
Some of the people, you'd be like, who's that? And you'd be like, I don't know, who's it? Sometimes there'd be people living there, nobody even knew who they were.
It was really messy and everything, but it was great for, a very sociable place to be, and, lots of people to go climbing with and everything.
The local dump, well, it's kind of local dump, but with chairs and beds, really.
Quentin, who had a dog, and he just let the dog shit on the carpet. And his girlfriend turned up and said, just clear this mess up when I come round next time. And he said, okay. But Quentin, being a sort of an academic, knew that if he put shaving foam over the shit, that it would just neutralise the odours and any bacteria in it. So when she came back, it was sort of cleared up, just sprayed with little white foam mountains of shaving foam.
So I guess the process of making a 1 hour long documentary, for me, it was a very long process in that you really have to, I had to storyboard a lot of it and research a lot of it and, you know, collate all the archive footage and things like that. And then once you get all that, you need to go and talk to your people that are in the film, and that's a very long process as well. But the style of films that I make, I don't get people to sort of, I don't say, can you say this on camera, because it'll really help the story. I like to sort of interview them and rely on what they say. So that sort of guides your story as well. And yeah, it doesn't end up where you think it's going to end up, basically. So it's definitely a different process to just going out and filming your mates, or, you know, coming to an event and just shooting that for the weekend, yeah.
Wind that blows through every crack. The wild and tortured dream of straw that broke their camel's back. We slipped up again, we slipped up again. I wonder why, I wonder why.
The way we interact with the sport today, that was all sort of laid out in the 1980s. The ethics changed to a point where when you go sport climbing now, that's what they sort of created. I mean, sticky rubber came in, they started training. And climbing as a sort of professional, no one was really a professional climber before the 80s, so they kind of started, they realised they had this image and they started putting a value on it. And I think that essentially climbing what it is today started back then, really. And yeah, I think that's the message, yeah.
I think people were looking for answers to questions. Although people bouldered, virtually no one bouldered for the sake of bouldering. Jerry clicked onto bouldering quite quickly. Part of his success was that, and he switched Ben onto it as well. And to a certain extent, people like that, they saw bouldering as one of the answers.
And then Andy built in his garage a wooden board with numbers on it. So it was probably maybe like 2 or 3 feet high, 4 foot wide. And they just put some finger holes on it, put numbers on them, moves like that. So it was fantastic for finger strength.
Yes! That was terms, you cheating fucker. Cut that out.
I think climbing in recent years it's going down a sort of ultra professional model. There's lots of like professional climbers in their early 20s who are so dedicated to the sport, and they're really, really professional. Like when you talk to them on camera and you interview them, they say all the sort of right things. So I think it's becoming very professional. It's almost like a career ladder within climbing, I think. And I guess they've learnt a lot from those early days in the 80s when, like, Ben and Jerry, they did really well out of climbing, and they earned probably a bit more than a lot of climbers do now. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of superstars in the near future, especially with climbing coming into the Olympics, and yeah, a lot more people to film, that's for sure.
We're here today in Jerry's gym to train. We're training for HC+. We're talking dedication, and that's what we're here to do. This is how we work out, boys. Tells me relax. Aggressive and angry. I think a bad man are permanently safe. I think us.
Thanks, Nick. Now, if you want to watch that film, and trust me, you do, because it's brilliant, it's on YouTube, it's on the UKC website, and of course, there's a link in the description below. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.